Welcome, gentlemen. How are you?
Hi, doing
Good.
good.
Thank you for being here with us tonight. We're going to go ahead and start in. I've got several questions to ask you, and I'm sure our audience will have questions for you as well. So I'd like you guys to go ahead and go on around and tell us your name and a little bit about what you do. Chris, do you want to start us out?
Sure. Hi, I'm Chris Mangles. I'm a professor of theater at College of the Sequoias. I teach a lot of the theater classes, and I also teach film appreciation.
And Ethan, how about you?
All right. Hi, my name is Ethan Rule. I am a post-production coordinator on a pilot for ABC called Triage. And previously, I've worked in trailers and on other shows for the CW.
Welcome. And David, are you there?
I am. Hello. Sorry.
No problem.
I had to do one little thing before we started.
That's okay. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself and let them know what you do, and we'll go from there.
Hi, my name is David Rasner. I'm a full-time teacher, a theater arts teacher. I guess in the past, I've come here to talk about voiceover and sort of post-audio world of Hollywood and what that's like. So.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so each of you have a pathway in arts and entertainment. We'd like to hear about your education, your training, internships, different things that you did on your journey to get where you are. Ethan, do you want to start us out?
Sure thing. So my first 2 years, I went to UCSB. I actually went there because I wanted to be a computer science major, and their program really aligned with what I wanted to do. And then very quickly realized that that was not what I wanted to do and that I wanted to be in film. So I switched things up, switched over to English, and used that to transfer to UCLA into their film and television program. I was there for 2 years, and while I was there, I interned at Berlanti Productions for a full year in their development internship. I interned at NBC for a quarter in a casting internship because I was trying to just kind of get my feet wet, figure out what I wanted to do. And then after I left school, I ended up taking a job at a trailer house, Workshop Creative, for about a year, learning how to do like basic assistant editing and PA work on trailers. And that kind of led me to where I am today. I kind of consider all of that my education to get to here.
Okay, so Ethan, back up. For those of us that aren't in that industry, what is a trailer house?
Trailer house is basically the company that makes any of the trailers you see before movies or on TV today.
Coming soon to the theater next to you, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, a few companies will like make their trailers in-house. Like Marvel will do a lot of their stuff kind of in-house, just for safety because they're super spoiler averse. But for the most part, those companies will outsource their trailers to another company that's dedicated to making them. And that was my job for about a year, was working for one of those houses.
Okay, so let's back up just a little further. So back at UC Santa Barbara and your computer engineering, what experience made that light bulb go off that this was not the way you were going to go?
Actually, I was taking a few computer science classes and I wanted something a bit more creative in my schedule just to kind of like even it out. And so I took a screenwriting class, and I found that I was enjoying the screenwriting class way more than any of my actual classes. And I was like, wow, maybe I shouldn't be doing the thing that's making me miserable. Maybe I should be doing the thing that I'm actually enjoying. Even if like there's a stress to this, I'd rather enjoy this stress than like loathe this other stress. So I switched over to English so I could continue with the screenwriting class and take a few of their other classes.
And then what made you decide to go from UC Santa Barbara to UCLA?
That was a mix of things. I had always dreamt of going to UCLA, so part of it was just a personal like goal of mine to go there. And then part of it was I wanted a program that was designed around 2 years so that it wouldn't be me losing anything by transferring in. I wouldn't be losing any experience versus like someone that was at UCLA from the beginning.
Fair
And
enough.
UCLA's program at the time was designed around like 2 really intensive years rather than spread out around 4. So it was a perfect fit for me. And it was actually the only film school I applied to. And I just happened to get in.
Okay. When we have students that just apply to one college, we call it a suicide run. You're either in or you're not in. And then what internships, can you expand on that at UCLA?
Of course. So my first internship was for a company called Berlanti Productions. They make a ton of shows on TV. The Flash, Arrow, Riverdale. Pretty much anything that you see on the CW is probably coming from them or one other person, and most of it's from them. And so at the time, they were like just getting off the ground with Riverdale, and with, I think, Legends of Tomorrow were like the shows that were in development when I was there. And I got to basically just read scripts for them every day. I would go in 2 times a week and I would read like 4 or 5 scripts and write something called coverage, which is basically I read the script and then I take what I read and kind of write a very quick synopsis of it, and then kind of give my input on whether I think that they should actually have one of the actual producers read it or not. I'm basically kind of the first line of defense on, is this a crappy project or not?
And that was as an intern that you did that?
Mm-hmm. That was as an intern.
That's a lot of power as an intern.
Yeah, they give a lot of power to the development interns. Typically it's very like basic level stuff of just like, is this written at like a reasonable level? Is this a interesting enough story? Because you get a lot of scripts submitted all the time, but how many of them are just a reskinned version of Friends, for example? And you need someone to weed out like the 5 Friends clones to get the one that's unique, so that when the producer is actually reading it, it's actually like a good use of their time and they can decide what's the best project for them rather than just wasting their time reading a bunch of projects that probably shouldn't have made it to their desk in the first place.
So I always tell students the college degree will get you the interview. The internships that you do in college get you the job. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree with that. I think it was that internship in particular, that one at Berlanti for the year, that really got me my first job. And it took me a while to get my first job even with that internship. It was definitely a struggle because Hollywood is a competitive place. But once I was in there, the jobs are easier to come by because the more experience you have, the easier it is to get more experience.
That makes sense.
And those
Thank you.
internships really help that. So.
Now that's great information. Chris, what's your education and your path that you took?
I actually grew up in Exeter, so I'm a local boy, and I went to COS out of high school because I already sort of had a trajectory and wanted to eventually pursue a master's degree. So I sort of was aware of cost balancing everything. So I went to COS for 3 years to study theater, and then wound up transferring to Fresno State, where I got my bachelor's degree in theater, and then eventually transferred to San Diego State. Well, not transferred, I was accepted into the graduate program in musical theater at San Diego State, and got my MFA from there. Worked as an actor in San Diego for about a year until I found out that San Diego has a lot of great theater, but not theater that they hire locals to do. So they basically said, if you want to stay in San Diego, you have to go somewhere else and become well-known there so that we'll hire you to come back. So, and I really loved San Diego, so I wanted to come back. So I wound up going to Chicago because I heard it was a really good place to go. And then sort of forgot about San Diego and got part of the Midwest theater scene. I did work in Chicago, I did work in Milwaukee. Was about to move to New York when 9/11 happened. So that sort of put the very quick kibosh on all of my actor friends in New York. Were like, do not come here. And now there's there's no work, there's nothing to do, we're all shut down. So I wound up coming back out to my parents' house in Exeter to save a little bit of money, and was offered a part-time teaching job at COS. And it's a long path, but the rest is history. 7 years later, wound up coming back. I moved to LA for a while, did some work down there, and then the full-time job opened up. And because I'd already taught here, I was invited to come on interview, and I got the job, and it's been great.
So our students might not think Chicago and theater, but they've got improv troupes there that I understand are kind of the feeding line into Saturday Night Live. Is that correct?
Yeah, Chicago is sort of the birthplace of improvisational comedy, and it's not just Chicago anymore. Those companies have sort of reached out across the nation. Los Angeles has a lot of great improv companies. The Groundlings in Los Angeles are sort of a direct route into that world also. But Chicago is really famous for being like a what you call a guerrilla theater town, which means that there's I believe there are more theater companies in the city of Chicago than anywhere in the United States, like actual independent theater companies. And lots of little storefronts, and a lot of some of the, I think the really like the respected character actors that you see in Hollywood are not all of them, but a ton of them are Chicago theater actors. That's where they began. They actually, interestingly, go back there still to do a lot of work. It's a really interesting community, and a really innovative one. And Chicago right now is sort of like the home of the huge movement in theater to bring more representation to the stage. So that's really like, that's where a lot of BIPOC theater is really, that's sort of like the heart of it right now. So it's a great place, I think, if you're interested in theater, especially if you're from an underserved population. It's a really good place to go. It's not quite as industrial, meaning like they're not as commercially minded. They're a little more interested in creating the work. And then, of course, things try to go to Broadway, or people move to Los Angeles to do film. But it's very much a sort of a hard scrabble, blue collar theater town, which is great.
So Chris, would you say that, I've had students ask this before, do you need your bachelor's degree in theater to go into acting? I have some students, they'll say they want to go directly from high school and try theater from there. What would be the pros and cons of going one way versus another?
Well, the tricky thing, I think, is that it's sort of like you said, the internship thing a while ago. I very much think that talent can get you a job, but only technique and discipline will get you a career. So I think that it's quite easy if you have a good look, or you're interesting, or you're just charismatic. I think it's I don't think easy, but I mean, I think there's certainly a lot of work that could be had without going to school. I think learning to take care of your body, learning to take care of your voice, sort of recognizing that you are the commodity that you are selling. You can't beat your body into oblivion to do that. And what the theater training does is it really sort of teaches you how to take care of the whole package, the mind, the body, the voice, and everything. So do I think it's necessary? Not at all. And I also know people who graduated from Yale and are not working, so there's no direct route, and there's no assured anything. So much of getting to work in the business, theater, film, or anything is going to be based on luck, honestly. Who do you know?
I think Ethan said that earlier too. It's very competitive.
Yeah. So I think that when I was a college student, one of the things I read, or not read, but I saw sort of like this, but it was a recorded interview with an actor, and I've never forgot it. And he basically, his name is Terrence Mann. He's very famous Broadway musical guy. And Terrence Mann said, if you can think of anything in this world that you'd be happy doing besides acting, go ahead and do that right now, because eventually you're going to quit and go do that. So I think that it's sort of like, you've got to really have the fire in you to pursue it, because it's a hard life, And I was really fortunate to get to do things, and I didn't feel like I was confronted with a lot of rejection, but I also wasn't confronted with nonstop success either. So, you know, I feel really lucky, I think, finding a job in education, which was always a great passion of mine. Before I wanted to go into theater, I wanted to be a teacher. So it sort of was kind of coming full circle, and now I get to do both. But I definitely think that it's people that are like, I'm just going to skip it and go do it. That's cool. But you also have to recognize that you're a very specific commodity when you do that. Whereas people who are learning to train their mind and their body and their voice and learn technique and develop discipline and make connections, you know, they may have a leg up down the road on you. So it's just sort of like, I don't think there's an answer to it. That's the hard thing about art, about, you know, going into the arts field, right? Is there's nothing that you can be the most talented person in the world and not work. And also you can be the not most talented person in the world and work. So, you know, it's a hard, but it's something everybody needs to be aware of. So.
Thank you, Chris. David, do you want to tell us about your path and the voiceovers and where it's led you?
Sure. Similar path, actually, preceding Mr. Mangles. So I went to COS not having a clue about what I wanted to do, or even understanding that there was something that I like to refer to as a blue-collar actor, which I think a lot of things that Chris is talking about, that's really important to, you know, there's not just the extremes of poverty and being starved, but there's something that in between that. When I got to COS, I transferred to Fresno State and got my Bachelor's of Arts at Fresno State. And then at that moment, I realized I was in a community of people that where, yes, you can make a career of this. This is for real. And I auditioned for a bunch of graduate schools, and I decided to go with the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. So I got my what is called my terminal MFA there. It means all my coursework, but it was a 2-year program. And that was pretty much it for me. I felt that I was going to be a regional theater actor, and I was really lucky. I worked at Magic Theater, Berkeley Rep, Shakespeare Santa Cruz, a lot of really theaters that I dreamed of working at. And I thought, well, let's go to Los Angeles, because I think what Chris was saying is that if you want to do A, then you have to do B. So it was, I really believed that to do more theater, which I wanted to do, that's my love, still is, I needed to do film so I could do theater. That's the irony of that. So I went to Los Angeles, and I think immediately I discovered in LA that theater in LA is it's hard to find. It's not a theater town. Is there good theater? Yes, but a lot of it is so influenced by the film industry. That's really what that town is about. And I lost my distaste for theater. It was I just didn't think people had the love of theater. So luckily, I got into to voiceover. And immediately, and actually I should say improvisation. I took classes at the Groundlings and worked my way up in the Groundlings, which is, as Chris mentioned, a West Coast source for SNL. And as soon as I got into improv, that really opened a lot of doors for me. And simultaneously, I was getting into voiceover through my acting teacher. And that is in voiceover or improv. I began to realize that most of the people that I worked with, almost 100% of them were very talented. It was almost impossible to find in improvisation people who were, you know, just a look, or they don't have any substance to their, you know, they just was talent all around. And I got to work with some great people. Amazing people, and my voiceover career, I guess if you want to call it, was a lot of fun. I mean, I think, and it paired well with improvisation, and something that I realized about Los Angeles, and particularly the commercial aspect of Los Angeles, is that no one wants a theater actor in Los Angeles. This is important to know. you know, they're looking for stand-up comics. Improvisation is a direct link to any kind of commercial work in LA. That's what I discovered. But it was fun. It was a lot of fun. And then through circumstance, I came back to education, right? I started teaching. And then I'm in a position now where I'm back to doing what I love, which is theater. It's been a while. It probably will be a little bit before I could do another play, but because I'm really busy. But that's my career path.
So you said that your instructor in LA, it was at the Groundlings, was the one that connected you with the voiceovers.
No, actually, that's my main acting teacher, Jack Fletcher, who was a practical an institution at ACT. John C. Fletcher, his father, directed there and was one of the early members. And Jack was an amazing guru teacher, incredible person and director. And he began doing voice ADR directing in Los Angeles. And he brought me in because he knew I did impersonations. He knew I did weird sounds. My first, voiceover gig was barking. I played two dogs, so it was just all barking noises. And the impersonations helped, but that kind of got me started. He constantly brought me in on stuff. He had a lot of faith in me. And then once I became kind of known in smaller circles, work turned into work. So that's how.
So would you say that developing those relationships with your instructors, and all three of you can comment on this, helps you maybe find those opportunities to do internships? Because sometimes internships aren't something that are just advertised or out there, but those connections that you make at your school with your instructors are the ones that open up those doors.
Yeah, and I think Chris was talking. I think you posed a question to Chris about whether you need to go to school. Whether college is important to an actor, and no, not really. Johnny Depp stepped off. The famous story: he stepped off a bus, and the next day he auditioned for 21 Jump Street, and that's it. That's the extent of his training. But I do think that there's two things that going to college can bring, and I'm addressing your thing. That's networking.
Okay, thank you.
Because you'll need that. You'll need people that depending on what school you go to, there are reputations. So if you go to Juilliard or Yale or ACT, there are these communities out there, and interestingly enough, there are casting circles that use some of the same people, which is really interesting. Like you'll see a television show like, oh, that is clearly an ACT show because, wow, there's a bunch of ACT alumni there. Or you'll see like another show, it's like, wow, they're obviously, there's a bunch of people that are affiliated with this school. So I think that does pan out. And just to, again, pick up what Chris was saying, I think you can focus on one aspect of the entertainment industry. You can do film, but it's best to have the skills to do everything, because if you want to work as a blue collar actor, and that's an actor that works constantly, you need to be a jack of trades. You need to be able to do musical theater. You need to do Shakespeare. You need to do voiceover, film, and that's what training college can give you, is allow you the tools to work in any setting. So that's important.
Okay, so Chris referred to blue collar actor. You referred to blue collar actor. Define blue collar actor. Is that the one that, does that mean that you're kind of more in the background? It just makes it paycheck to paycheck, or all kinds of different visions come up in my head. So what exactly is blue collar actor?
Go ahead, Dave. It's your word. I quote you when I say it.
Is that a question for me or for Chris?
That's for you.
Either or.
Okay. Well, I mean, I talk about this all the time, and that's that there is something in between a complete star and someone who's insane and penniless, penniless and insane. You know what I mean? So there's something in between that, and I think that's that we don't see acting as a trade. We don't really see it as a trade like plumbing or carpentry or any trade where you learn a set of skills and you apply those set of skills to keep yourself working. For some reason, we don't even think about that in terms of acting or any part of the entertainment industry. But it is a set of skills, and you know, you can make a living depending on what your skill set is. So that's what I mean by a blue collar actor, is that someone who is trained, they have a skill set, and they apply that skill set to numerous jobs that they might audition for or be available for.
Okay, that helps. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, so next question. What does a typical day look like for you? Ethan, let's start with you. You've been sitting in the corner there for a while, sorry.
No worries.
Okay, we're making the rounds.
A typical day for me is very different now than it was a year ago. Because basically the way that my job works now is I work from home 99% of the time, like most people right now are doing. Most of my job can actually be done from home. I do a lot of like paperwork management, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I handle all of our budgets. I coordinate all of the actors to come in and record. I coordinate like with our editors to make sure that they get paid for overtime, that kind of stuff. I do a lot of that kind of coordination in my job. And so for me now, a lot of that is just done from home, and I don't have too much that happens outside of that. And then I kind of just put out fires as they appear, and they always appear. So typically my day starts at 9 a.m. That's kind of when I told my boss I'm available, and then I'm pretty much on call for the rest of the day until I go to bed. That's
Wow.
the COVID world of it. Before, on my last show, Charmed, which I was on before the virus hit, I was typically at work from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. It was a long day, but it had pretty structured hours, and then I was done. And on that job, similar thing with the added caveat of I was a assistant rather than a coordinator. So I did a lot of runs, which basically meant I got in my car and I drove wherever they needed me to drive. So if they needed a hard drive over at the Disney lot, I took it to the Disney lot. If they needed me to bring in lunch, I brought in lunch. If they needed me to drop off something at someone's house, I did that too. A lot of my job was kind of delivering DVDs, picking up drives, that kind of thing. And that's kind of like the first level job when you're working on when you're working in post-production or in like a writer's room or in casting. That's kind of like the base rung, is like working as a production assistant.
So paying your dues.
Yeah, it's paying your dues. And then the next kind of rung up for that in post-production, which is what I do, is coordinator. And then there's a supervisor and then a producer. And those are kind of like the 4 levels. And I got promoted to the second one to come onto this pilot, which is why I left Charmed.
So when you're talking and describing your day-to-day right now, it sounds very much more administrative rather than anything else. Where do you hope to build from there? Or is this the part that you want to really focus in on long term?
For the moment, this is actually like the part that I want to focus in on, because you do get to have a bit more creative say as you get further along. It takes a while to get there, but I actually really like the post-production side of it, because a lot of like basically like when you're like producing a show and writing a show, you're basically putting all these parts into the universe that could eventually make something. But you can like shoot a million scenes, and if someone assembles them poorly, it can be terrible. And if someone assembles them great, it can be amazing. A movie coming out this week, Zack Snyder's Justice League, is a very good example of that. It had a lot of reshoots, but just because of how it was edited and how it was put together, the original version of Justice League was a flop and people wanted them to completely recut the movie and release it, which is what they're doing. It's
So
like you can make something amazing just by putting things together a bit differently, choosing different music, choosing different lines, different takes. And I think that process is just really cool. I kind of like the puzzle piecing aspect of it. And I like that where I am, I get a bit more of a bird's eye view of it rather than kind of being in the thick of it. So for me, the administrative aspect allows me to be part of it without necessarily being responsible in my day-to-day for, oh, I have in 2 days, I have to completely cut this project together. I can still be involved and then still kind of work on my own stuff when I feel like it. But where I'd eventually like to end up at is a producer, which is kind of what I went into film school to do.
Nice.
Where I'd have a bit more creative say, where I'd be able to give notes in like meetings and through the edit process. That's where I always wanted to end up. Originally, it was to be a producer on like more of the writing end. Fun fact in TV, if you see people like listed as like producers and executive producers, oftentimes they're like the head writers on the show. Not even a lot of the writers will eventually get producer credit after they've worked on it for a number of years.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, it's a way to kind of bump their pay, bump their status, help them get a bit more agency over the show.
So I've heard about different actors unions, that type of thing. Do you have to be in a union for your position?
For my position, no. If I was an editor or an assistant editor, yes, I would be in the Editors Guild. But for my position, I don't need to be in a union. I believe that there is like a unionization movement starting for some of the positions that I kind of work in like the PA and coordinator world, but right now that's not really a thing. I would love for it to be a thing. I think that unions are great, but not for me yet.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Chris, why don't you tell us day to day, first of all, as what you experience as an actor, and then also day to day what you're experiencing as a teacher? Because you and I were talking beforehand about the productions you put on right now for COS and the time that goes into those as well.
Right. So first of all, I work a lot harder as a teacher than I ever did as an actor. We cleared that up right off the bat. I have a lot less time to myself. As an actor, I would make time every day for physical health. You know, if you're not working out, then you're doing something to try to stay fit because you are. And it's not even about. I mean, yes, it's about your look, but it's not even just about that. It's just about stamina. You just have to. I have two very different sleep schedules. One of them was my acting sleep schedule, where I basically hit my peak energy at about 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night. And that's kind of what you needed it to hit, because you needed to be able to, you know, perform in front of a paying audience in that moment. And then you'd be up till 2 or 3, then you'd go to sleep, and then you're getting up at, 10. And it's not because you're sleeping in, but it's because literally you've kind of adjusted your sleep schedule so that you're hitting your sort of midday push, in the evening when you have to work. Now that was specific to theater. I didn't do film or anything like that. So I can't address, I know that's an incredibly exhausting schedule when you do that, but it's also much more like self-contained. You do that hard for a few weeks and then theater gets stretched out a little bit longer. But not as intense on a daily basis. But, I would get up, I would take care of myself. A lot of times you're doing a side job in addition. In Chicago, I would temp a lot. So I didn't have the luxury of sleeping in all the time. Sometimes I'm up at 7 going in. I have a friend who did an off-Broadway show about 5 years ago. She was the lead in an off-Broadway show. Like, it was a huge thing. And she was still working 40 hours a week in an office before, and then she'd get off her office hour job and, you know, drive to the theater and perform that night, like basically do another job. So another full-time job. And that was a real wake-up call to me to be like, yes, it's not, you know, if you're in theater, you're not going to be making the kind of money where you're going to be sort of enjoying the celebrity that you could, or not celebrity, but sort of the comfort that you could, even if you were doing just like walk-on roles in film and television. It just pays a lot better that way. Or not walk-ons, I should say, but like featured roles, like what they call day players. And so it's a tricky thing, but I would take care of myself health-wise. You know, you have to be really conscious of what you're eating. You have to be really conscious of, you know, going out and partying. I think a lot of people sort of associate that it's going to be one and the same. And I certainly knew a lot of actors who did that, but I know a lot of actors who did that and were very successful, you know. So you got to really take care of yourself. It's, you know, you can't get sick. There's no sick pay. There's none of that stuff. There's no vacation, you know. So you just really, like, you do it because you love it. As a teacher, it's very similar, except that you never leave the work. You never go home. Not really. At COS, I usually arrive between 7 and 9 in the morning and usually go home between 10 and 11 at night if we're producing shows. And that's pretty solid. You know, I have breaks during the day, maybe an hour or maybe a 2 or 3 hour break sometimes on nice days, but a lot of times I'm working like that. I'm working on the weekends. There's a lot to be said for English teachers and everybody who grade all the time. I don't have to grade as much, but I do have a lot more sort of like hands-on assessment that I have to do. So, you know, I don't teach 3 1-hour classes a week. Instead, I teach, you know, multiple long-hour classes a week because the students are in rehearsal, which is a show. It's not an extracurricular activity. So, I mean, it's a class. So it's a different challenge. And I'm also the scenic designer at COS. So I also build the sets and design those, and you kind of have to find the time to do that. That's not when you're doing everything else. So it's a lot of time balance. I think that Dave can definitely speak. Dave had a much longer career as an actor than I did, and can speak about how much balancing of your time you have to do to be able to be in one place that makes the money and another place that potentially builds those connections.
Okay, so we'll tag into Dave then. So as a voice actor, what was a typical day looking like for you?
I don't think I can answer that question. I think I think it's what was a week or 3-day period, because unless you're John DiMaggio or someone who is really well known in the voiceover industry, and if you're working every day, that's extremely rare, and that's a great place to be. But like Chris said, you know, basically you would have your day job, you know, and I think if you're going to work if you're going to go take a call for a commercial, on-camera commercial, if you're going to take a call for a voiceover job, your agent calls you and sends you out, you say, you have to drive to Santa Monica. Oh no. So you have to be there like, you know, 11 o'clock, that's your call time. And then, you know, you have to maybe race over to Studio City. So sometimes you're auditioning and you need that flexibility. So instead of waiting tables, I was lucky to substitute teach. And then later I worked for a law firm as a paralegal. So, which was great because I could just take off if I had an audition. I just didn't go to work that day, you know, and made up for it later. So sometimes, you know, a typical day might be like I wake up at 10 and you know, get to the office, and then, you know, if I go on a call, I sneak off for a couple of hours and come back. If it's a day of voiceover work, well, that's just fantastic. And what that is basically showing up at 9:30, t-shirt and jeans, and you see some old friends. You go to you know, post studio like Salami or the Annex or these places that do all the post work, and you work a full day. And that's the best kind, is when you have a full day of work, and they take you to lunch and you're done at 5. And that would usually be voiceover work.
So
you know.
Dave, when I think voiceover work, I see a booth and you're sitting in a booth with a microphone all day in a dark little space.
Yeah, I guess I should
That thing, I mean,
I should distinguish between you know, sort of voiceover work, animation, and what is called my gosh, it's been so long. But doing what is called the background noises for television and film. So you're in a loop group, and a loop group is a great job. It's a very different job. You don't really play any particular characters. You go in there, you'll do walla, making indiscriminate background noises that they can bleed in, or you're doing single lines called free and clear, like, hey, how's it going? And they'll put that in the mix, or
back to the dog.
Yeah, or there will be a scene. So you know, if there's a restaurant or an outdoor thing, they're doing all that in post. They're manipulating all that in post. And that's what looping is. And that is great work. That was more 9 to 5. But a voiceover work is really a session. You know, it might be a long session, but usually it's maybe about 3 or 4 hours, or maybe 2 or 3 hours. It's pretty short, and you're in, you're out. So that's, I think, what you're thinking about, and going in a sort of a smaller, you know, something that looks like a walk-in closet maybe, and you're looking through the glass, and the engineer's there, the ADR director is there, and then you do your session, and then you leave, and that's it. So it's kind of 2 different worlds, but it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
And then you were also talking about improv.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
Did you do with improv?
So that would be in the evening. So unless I was taking a class at the Groundlings, which would be during the day, I was lucky enough to be in 2 shows, long form shows, which one was LA Sitcom, ran for about a month. And that was, you know, it was like a theater show in a sense. You have a curtain call, you show up and you do it. It's an hour and a half or 2-hour show. Then I got to be in a show called Liquid Radio Players, which was for.
I think you froze. Give it just a second here. You froze for a second there. Okay, you're back.
All right. The call, it's not like Chris could tell you about. As a regional actor, you perform 8 days, 8 performances a week. So it's nothing like that. It usually is like Friday, Saturday, that kind of thing. But it is a lot of fun. And I think, you know, I think in LA, I have to say that attending parties and socializing and network is critically important. You know, I think Chris probably could talk about the value of going, you know, for drinks after a show just to talk with people. It doesn't mean that you throw back drinks all night long. It's nothing like that. In fact, you know, if you're smart, you're just going to have, you know, you're not going to drink at all. You know what I mean? Because you do have a big day the next day. But it is important. That's part of that is having conversations and socializing and just, you know, I guess being noticed, you know, but don't talk about work. That's the secret.
Basically filling up the pipeline, which you want to do in any career. The more contacts, the more people you know in any industry, the more doors open. Same concept, correct?
It is. I can't stress enough, do not talk about work when you're doing that though. Don't ever talk about work. just
Be yourself.
Just make friendships and talk about, you know, what do you like to cook, or, you know, what's your favorite band? Never talk about. That's a big thing. All
right, sounds good. So you have to be an interesting person on top of it, in other words.
It's, yeah, the audition is before the audition.
So getting to know the personality.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, Ethan, what advice would you have to students?
What advice would I have to students? Well, my general advice would be, if you are interested in writing, write. If you're interested in acting, try to find opportunities to act. If you have an interest right now that you know that you are interested in pursuing later, try to find outlets to do that. They're not always easy to find, but you can usually find some way or some form to get close to it that just kind of gives you the baseline of experience. And you really don't know how much that sets you apart when you get to that next stage, just having even that baseline of experience. Beyond that, just if you're interested in creating things, even if it's not like the thing that you're like interested in pursuing, or even if you don't know what you want to pursue, just create. When I was in middle school, I would animate these really bad Flash animations with my best friend at the time, and I put them online, and they were absolute garbage, truly trash. But I learned some like very fundamental storytelling lessons from that. How to tell a story with a beginning, middle, and end, even if it was a very bad beginning, middle, and end. And you build on that. You learn how to write a bit more. You learn how to structure a bit more, draw a bit better. And
so learning from your mistakes, growth mindset.
Yeah. If you have a growth mindset, you will be fine. It will take you however long it takes you to get there. But my grandma always said, the delay is never the denial. And I think that that's a very true mindset, especially for this industry. You might not get your job as soon as you move out to LA or to Chicago or to wherever you move. It might take you a few months, it might take you a year, it might take you a few. But if you keep at it and you keep practicing and you keep working, you may never be Tom Cruise or Steven Spielberg or whoever your idol is, but you can make a living doing this, whatever this is for you. It can be your job, and if it's what drives you each day, then it should be your job.
So another thing I like that you said earlier, that you went in this computer science. My youngest right now is applying to college, and he's freaking out. How am I supposed to know what major, Mom? How do I make this decision? And he's like, everyone else seems to know what they're going to major in, and he's freaking out because he doesn't yet. So it really kind of leads into the idea that you don't have to necessarily know what you're doing exactly when you hit college, but all those experiences around you and the classes you take, the things that you get involved with kind of shape that path. And you don't have to have a perfect path laid out before you get to the college, correct?
Exactly. For me, me and my partner actually have had two very different experiences. My partner knew what they wanted to do pretty much from day one. I was very much kind of jumping around with a bunch of different things that I wanted to do. And both of us, we've gotten to this point in our lives, and there are pieces of that that are amazing, that like our path led us here and they were perfect. And there are pieces where we're like, wow, I really wish I could go back and change that. Or for her, like she wishes she could try new things. I wish I had a bit more of like stability of like I focused on this for a set period of time so that I was a bit better prepared for it. You get the path that you get. And no matter what you prepare, life will throw you hurdles. So learning how to adapt to those hurdles is always a better way to approach things than trying to stay strictly on one path, because it's always going to change, whether you want it to or not.
So be open to new experiences.
Exactly.
Perfect. Chris, what's your advice for students? You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm trying to find out where I had it off. I think that what Ethan said is like, that's gold. That's across the board to me. I think it's really important that you take all opportunities that are put to you when you're young and you're thinking that you're going to be selective about what you work on. I'm not suggesting that you let yourself get taken advantage of, because also a really passionate artist is an easily exploited human being, but I definitely think that you need to humble yourself always before the art, and go out and do a little bit of everything. I think that a lot of people come out of high school and their idea is, I'm going to go become a Broadway actor, or I'm going to go be a star in Hollywood. And it's just so, even if that happens to you, that's an unrealistic perspective to take. You're sort of setting yourself up for disappointment. So I think that you want to go out and be the person who, you know, knows what it is to be a stage manager, knows what it is to work backstage, knows what it is to be a character actor, knows what it is to work wardrobe. You really need to sort of immerse yourself in the entire business of the work, you know? And I think that I certainly think that it was the thing that probably was the most formative thing for me, was that I was very hungry to learn everything. So I wouldn't do everything just because it needed to be done, or I shouldn't say that. Like, if I designed a set at 18 years old for something, it was really exciting to do it. And if they were like, we want you to design all our sets, and if it wasn't my passion, I wasn't going to do that. But I wasn't going to think that I'm above that, or that's not something I could do. Everything that was an opportunity, every door that opened, I would walk through and check it out. And that's actually how I went from being an actor more to being a director, which, as Dave said a while ago, one of the reasons I went into directing is because I thought, I think if I think of all the professional actors I know, I can count on a couple of hands who's not good. Whereas if I thought of all the professional directors I knew, I could count on a couple of hands who was good. So I sort of realized that there was going to be more opportunity for me in that route, and I still found it fulfilling. So I think that you have to sort of be ready to see, you know, the open doors and be ready to go through them. I think that a lot when you hear about people being like, oh, it's so competitive and I stopped doing it, it's because they kind of limited what they thought they were going to be able to do. And I think it's really important that, like Ethan said a while ago, which I think is so great, if you like to write, then write. If you like to act, then act. Don't think that it's something that's going to be, oh, I'll wait till later on when I'm getting paid for it. It doesn't work like that. So.
Yeah. And I think that can go over into a lot of career pathways, that the more experiences you have, the more desirable you are as an employee or part of a team.
Yeah.
So yeah, that goes broad that way. David, what's your advice to students? Oh, you're muted.
Look, just to echo what Chris said, if you really love it, then do it, and do it with as many different environments as you possibly can. I look back and, like, I'm not accrediting anything to anything that you might call success, but I know that when I did theater and I really loved acting, I did like 6 plays a year, and I did them everywhere. I like anywhere I could act. Ice House Theater, COS. I know some people who are like, well, I only do theater here, or I only do plays here. And it's like, you got to do it everywhere. You know, I think do as much as you can to stay creative. I should say that I think a really important thing, two more things. One is to not care about anything. You know, that's my advice that I got.
Wait, say that again.
This is what I got from when I moved to LA. My acting teacher, Jack, said, here's the secret to Los Angeles: don't care about anything. And that really, like, the more and more I thought about it, meaning don't care what other people think about you. Don't care about what's happening around you. Just focus on doing the best you can. And that's it, you know, because I think a lot of this is psychological. It really is psychological, especially when you're told no a million times. You know, but I think it's just try not to care. Just do what you love and stay positive. And the last thing I'm going to say, I think maybe the most important, is be nice to people. Okay, because don't talk about someone behind their back. Don't do the right thing. Have manners, be courteous, and be the nicest person in the world. And that will keep you working almost more than anything. because in Los Angeles, and Ethan, you know this, and Chris, you know this, people tend to work with the people that they like working with. Talent's important, but it's the people that you enjoy being with. So if you're cool and you're nice and you're friendly and you're honest and real, those are the people that will always do well. And that's important. So be nice.
Manners matter.
Hey, I have to piggyback on that because this is one of those stories that you have to hear.
Okay.
In college, I ran afoul of another student who he was not a very serious performer, and like I thought this guy was a fool. I really did, and he didn't have much interest in doing anything but partying and everything else. And about 10 years later, I walked into a casting office and he owned the casting office. And he basically told me I could turn around and walk right back out. So you have to be ready. Like you got to learn to swallow your pride and just be like, you know what? If I have issues with you, that's okay. We can still be professional together. I, in college, thought that I should let him know how little respect I had for him, and I've regretted that forever. Not just because of the costing me a job, but just regretted like learning that lesson that hard way. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, and I think that goes for any career path that you choose. Be nice as you go along, and keep your thoughts to yourself that way.
Yeah.
Okay, gentlemen, last question of the night. Okay, if you were not doing what you're currently doing, what would your dream job be? Ethan,
What would my dream job be?
if you're not doing what you're doing right now.
If I wasn't doing what I was doing right now. Honestly, the only other job that I ever considered was video game designer, which is kind of what got me interested in computer science. And then by the time I got to college and was interested in computer science, it was like app design and user interface design was what I was there for. It would probably be something in that respect, something a bit more like computery that related still to creation, but more like games.
Still very creative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Using computer science to create things as opposed to using cameras and people to create things. That would probably be my dream job.
Perfect. Chris?
It's probably connected, but to me, it's so different. If I wasn't doing what I do, I absolutely would be a filmmaker. That's what I would want to do. I would want to direct film, and probably write too, but definitely direct. It's where my passion has always been. I've almost gone into it 3 times in my professional career, like stopped to go back to school to study it. So maybe it's still coming. I don't know.
Yeah, there's always a next phase of life, right? David, what would your job be if you weren't doing what you currently were doing?
I would probably be a regional theater actor in a company. The idea of company is something that used to be really popular in the 70s and even in the 80s. But that would be a dream, and to work with people that I trust and I get along with. So that would be amazing, to be in a very good theater in a company.
Hey, for our audience, tell them what a company is.
Well, I think, not to do a historical lesson, but basically there was a movement over a long period of time to leave New York for theater, because New York was very competitive, and people wanted to have families, and they wanted to work year round. So people began migrating at different decades out of New York and establishing regional theater companies, and for different purposes. But the idea of a company is basically you have maybe 30 actors, and you do 3 or 4 roles a year. Maybe one's a feature role, supporting, and then maybe a couple walk-ons, and then maybe a couple of times you just don't act. Maybe you work around the theater. So that is a really beautiful notion, because it allowed people to have families and also do the thing that they loved. And that I think that's what I would really enjoy. That would be my dream job.
I read one time that when Friends was starting its popularity, David Schwimmer played Ross on Friends, came from, blank on the word you just said, theater, the group.
He came from Looking Glass Theater in Chicago.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so a troupe or whatever. Okay. And so because he came from that background, when it was time to negotiate raises, he knew to stay together as a group and demand the raise, and they were heard more than individually going up trying to ask for the raises. So that power, and like you said, having someone that has your back too. Okay, so let's go ahead and open it up to our audience. If you have questions for our panelists, please go down to the Q&A feature and type that in for us, and I'll read those off to them and see what they have to share with you. So if anyone has a question, use the Q&A feature and we'll go from there. Anything else you gentlemen would like to add while they think about what they would like to put down? Anything we left off tonight? Any regrets? Any, I would do it different if I had to do it over kind of moments? Don't all speak at once, please.
I don't think I really have any deep-seated regrets.
You're too young, Ethan, that's why.
I am too young to have any deep-seated regrets. In terms of just like my process of going into the film industry, I think that the biggest thing is, and I'm grateful that I learned this lesson early, but I wish I had learned it like coming out of college to begin with, is don't be as selective with the work. Be willing to try more things, try new things. I originally leaving school didn't think I'd be interested in post. It ended up being something that I really took to as I got the job in it. I thought I'd be working as like a writer's PA instead, but I actually really like what I'm doing a lot more than I think I'd like being in the writer's room and writer's PA position. So that is just.
Yeah, don't turn anything down like this.
Exactly.
You were saying earlier, yeah. Okay, we do have a question, and I think it's a great question. Is it normal to be terrified your first audition?
It's normal to be terrified your whole life when you audition. It's okay. I went to audition 2 years ago for a show. I had already been told, you're going to play the lead in this, and I still shook as I sang my audition song. So it has nothing to do with who you are as a performer. It has to do with whether or not you tell yourself, this is my opportunity to perform right now, or I want something that I don't have. It's scarier when you tell yourself it's a job interview. When you tell yourself, I just get to perform right now, it's much easier. That's my advice to overcome that fear. But if you figure out exactly how to do it, let me know.
David, any comments on that one? You're laughing a lot.
No, I do the same thing. You know, I sometimes I may do a monologue for my theater class, you know, something that I've 15 years, and like, oh my God, here comes the quivering lip, here comes the shaking. I'm like racing, I'm overacting, you know, and audition is just not the performance environment. That's what it is and it isn't. I mean, it is its own thing. It's a very hot environment. So I think you just need to know, I think it's tough. Musical theater audition, you need to nail your song. Your song needs to be so perfectly practiced and so over rehearsed that there's never, you can adjust for all the bizarre out of body experience that every single actor goes through when they audition. It's an out of body experience. So the more you are prepared, I mean, know your stuff, you know, on a subconscious, just subconscious level, then it'll be just that much better. That's the only thing that I can say. And stay loose and, stay as loose as you can.
Sounds good. Ethan, this is specifically for you. Says, how do you know if you're good writing? I love writing, but how does one know if they can get something, and how can they get better or improve?
Well, I think that there's two different sides to it. One is the more technical side of writing, which is like being good at grammar, being good at like forming like these kind of cohesive, interesting sentences, and that just comes with practice. The other piece is just having a voice, and I think that that's the far more important piece. And my personal view is that everyone has a voice. It's just a matter of honing it and finding it. If you love writing, it's something that you care about, I think that it's really just a matter of, at least in my personal opinion, of practicing it. It might take you a while, and not everyone is going to sell 1 million books or write a screenplay that immediately gets turned into a movie, but it's just practice, practice, practice. And if you practice enough, I personally think whoever you are, you may never be able to do it as your day job. That's something that's very rare and happens for very few people, but you can do it, and you can love doing it. My mom actually is a young adult author. She didn't publish a book until she was in her mid-40s. She spent her entire life, she did like odd jobs in the film industry, and then when me and my sister were born, pretty much just stopped working altogether for 10 years. But she eventually got there because it was something she cared about and knew that was important to her, and went through rejection after rejection after rejection on her first book, on her second book, until finally she published one. I think that, Lisa, if you love it, you can get there. And I think that you have got something if you love it. You just need to hone it.
Sounds good. So Ethan, I don't know if you would have the answer to this, but I'll throw it out there. In terms of colleges with good writing programs for theater, for movies, are there any particular schools that you would recommend?
Schools for good writing programs. I will personally plug both of my alma maters. I think that UCSB and UCLA both have excellent writing programs. UCLA possibly a bit better for film writing, but I think that UCSB does have a very good English program overall, but I'm biased. I think that in terms of like classically good schools, if you're looking to like be in like film, you can't really go wrong with like a USC. You can't go wrong with, I think Chapman is a really good up and coming school. If you want to go into like, if you just want to get better at writing in general, I think that going into an English program and then doing a film grad program is a pretty good way to go, or do any major and then go into a film grad program, because really all that you need to get into good film grad program is a passion and doing it a bit on your own. And then you can have some other skills to fall back on if it doesn't end up being your career. But I think that for like a grad school, UCLA is a good grad school, USC is a good grad school, AFI is a good grad school. I don't really know the East Coast schools as much. I know that NYU has an excellent program. I'm sure that any Ivy that you went to for any sort of English would give you an exceptional education. But that's obviously, it's an Ivy. It's not always the easiest to get into. I certainly didn't get into any of those. But
doesn't Harvard have the Lampoon Society?
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you're looking for like satire and that kind of like comic stylings, that's a great place to go. But you can kind of find outlets like that, I feel like, wherever you go. UCSB has like a few like kind of satire like writing sections of like their paper, and different like clubs that you can do that. Almost every school that I've seen that me or my friends went to has some sort of improv troupe. And that's a great way to kind of like hone your skills. And even that like helps you build on your writing. You wouldn't think that it necessarily would, because you're just kind of like, you're reacting to people, but that reaction can kind of teach you more about conversation, teach you more about like construction of like interaction. Everything that you're doing can help you be a better writer if you think about it in the right way for writing.
Yeah. Builds.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I think that gives us a lot of insight that way. Let me go ahead and move to the next question. I'm sorry to rush. We're just getting late and I hate to hold you guys too late. What would your advice be for a student who would like to be an actress but is super shy and quiet?
I have an idea.
Okay.
This is just, I work with high school students. You know, my gig right now is teaching at UPHS, University Preparatory High School. That's where I teach full time. And I have an I have a Theater 1 class. Chris, we changed it to drama from Drama 1 to Theater 1. We did it. So yes, that was important for me. Anyways, so I work with a lot of students that are coming on stage for the first time. And I think the thing to remember is that in many ways, Chris, you know this lesson, is that acting and real life they're exactly the same. The only difference is that you're observed when you act. You're being observed. So, you know, I think in everybody is an actor, you know, and I think one of the things is to just think about the times when you're not acting and think about the times when you're not on stage, you know, or not, and how much acting you do and what you naturally can do as an actor. And then say to yourself that really there is no difference between the two. And I think, and someone always told me, you know, the audience wants you to succeed. There's nobody in the audience that's wanting you to fail. Nobody wants you to do poorly. So when you are observed and you're on stage, every single person wants you to do a good job, you know. And I think just to keep that in mind, you know, everyone's supporting you. I think that helps anyways.
I'm going to pipe in on this one. In high school, I was actually extremely shy. And I did theater and musical theater in high school. And I always found it was easier to be a little more extroverted on the stage because I wasn't playing me, I was playing someone else. So that judgment I felt was always kind of taken out. And when you're shy, you're always worried about what people are thinking. But when you're on stage being someone else, that other person that you're playing is what's being judged, not necessarily you. I don't know, for me, it was much easier to be outgoing on the stage than it was in my daily life. I don't know how much that transfers to other people, but that's what I found. Do we have any more questions from our audience? We've had some great questions so far, and I'm not seeing anything pop up. Gentlemen, it's way past 7. I told you I tried to cut you loose at 7. I appreciate your patience going over our time, and I appreciate your time and your insight that you were able to give our students tonight. Thank you, and I'm sure I'll be calling you guys soon again when we have our next event. But Ethan, Christopher, David, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good night.
Bye.